All right. Today, we are digging into something that's more than just a policy or a piece of tech. We're looking at an entire architecture. It's a blueprint for a system designed from the ground up to manage, control, and ultimately define what the internet is inside a country's borders. We're talking about the architecture of Chinese digital sovereignty. So let's kick things off with a huge kind of paradoxical question. The internet, right? It was designed to be this global, borderless thing. So how on earth do you build walls around something that by its very nature was never supposed to have any? That's the fundamental challenge we're unpacking today. Here's our roadmap for how we're going to do it. First, we'll get a clear definition of what digital sovereignty even is. Then, we'll look at the three huge pillars holding it all up: the technology, the laws, and the companies that enforce them. And finally, we'll see how this whole structure is starting to impact the rest of the world. Okay, before you can start building anything, you gotta understand the vision, the blueprint. So first things first, what does digital sovereignty actually mean? At its heart, the idea is pretty straightforward. Think about it. A country controls who and what can cross its physical borders, right? Well, digital sovereignty applies that exact same logic to the digital world. It's the idea that a state should have the right to control the data and information crossing its digital borders. And this slide really lays out the two completely different visions for the internet's future. On the left, you've got the original dream, a borderless, free-flowing, decentralized network. But on the right, you have the digital sovereignty model, where national borders are very much real and digitally enforced, with the state sitting right at the center of control. It's a huge shift in philosophy. So, how do you actually build this digital border? Well, that brings us to our very first pillar, the technology itself, the massive infrastructure project that everyone's heard of, the Great Firewall. I think this quote really nails it. The technology isn't just a filter. It's framed as the main wall of a fortress. It's the first thing you see, the most obvious part of this entire architecture, and it's the primary gatekeeper for everything coming in or going out. Okay, so this wall isn't just one thing. It works in a few key ways. IP address blocking, that's pretty simple. It's like blocking a specific street address. DNS poisoning is way more clever. It's like changing the address for a website in a phone book so you end up somewhere completely different. Then you have deep packet inspection. Think of it like a digital customs agent that literally opens up your data to look for forbidden keywords. And finally, throttling just slows down access to certain sites so much that they become basically useless. So let's walk through what this looks like in real time. You try to go to a website outside the country. Your request immediately hits the firewall, which acts as this massive checkpoint. Instantly, the system scans your request for any red flags, a banned IP, a sensitive word. If it finds one, access denied, connection dropped. If it's all clear, you're allowed through. And this process happens millions and millions of times every single second. But, a wall without rules is just an obstacle. To make it a real instrument of policy, you need justification. And that brings us to our second pillar, the legal framework. You can think of these as the official building codes for the entire system. Yeah, this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The firewall is the technical tool, but it's the law that gives that tool its purpose, its power, and its authority. The law is what turns a piece of engineering into an official, state-sanctioned policy of information control. So what are these legal building codes? Well, they're built on a few really big ideas. You've got laws that mandate widespread data monitoring and rules about data localization that force companies to store all their user data inside the country. Then there's real name registration, which basically gets rid of online anonymity. And maybe most powerful of all, you have these intentionally vague definitions of what counts as harmful information, which gives regulators a ton of leeway to censor whatever they want. So the crucial thing to get here is that this legal framework is what makes the system so thorough. It's not just about blocking stuff from the outside, it's about creating a set of non-negotiable, legally binding rules that control how every tech company and every single user behaves inside the walls. Okay, so we've got the tech and we've got the laws, but who actually manages the insane amount of content being created inside the firewall every single day? Well, that brings us to our third pillar, the corporate gatekeepers. This analogy is just so powerful. The government builds the outer walls of the fortress, sure, but it basically hands over the job of policing the city inside those walls to the tech companies themselves. They become the de facto enforcers of the state's rules on their own platforms. And this means companies are put right on the front lines. They have to constantly scan for sensitive content, and they do it with huge teams of human moderators plus AI. They are legally required to take down anything the state says is illegal, and sometimes even report their own users to the authorities. And the bottom line is they have to self-censor constantly, because if they don't police their platforms well enough, they could lose their license to operate entirely. And this chart, wow, it really puts the scale of that effort into perspective. We tend to focus on the state's firewall, the automated tack at the border. But just look at that second bar. The amount of censorship work handled by corporations, by both humans and AI, is absolutely massive. It's a vast, decentralized system of control that actually dwarfs what the firewall itself does. So we've looked at the three pillars: the technical, the legal, and the corporate. Now let's take a step back and look at the finished architecture, the whole building, and talk about what it means for the rest of the world. And here it is, all laid out. The technical pillar is the external wall. The legal pillar is the blueprint and the source of authority. And the corporate pillar polices the city within those walls. They don't just exist next to each other, they lock together and reinforce each other, creating this incredibly comprehensive system of control. And this is maybe the most important takeaway of all. This combination creates something way more sophisticated than just a simple blockade. It's a living, breathing architecture designed to manage an entire information ecosystem, not just by filtering what comes in, but by actively shaping the conversations that are happening within it. So, why should any of this matter to the rest of the world? Well, here's why. This architecture is basically becoming an export. Reports suggest that over 40 other countries are now studying this model, adopting its technology and its legal frameworks to get more control over their own corners of the internet. Which, of course, leaves us with one last big question. As more and more countries start building their own digital walls based on this kind of model, are we actually watching the end of the idea of a single global internet? Are we heading into an era of many national, fragmented splinter nets? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.